Maya stared at the appointment reminder on her phone for the third time that morning. The text message blinked back at her stubbornly. Reminder, Dr. Hayes' appointment today at 2 p.m. Her stomach did another nervous flip, and she considered, for what felt like the 100th time, canceling the whole thing. You cannot back out again, her best friend Chloe had warned her just yesterday. Maya, you've been putting this off for 8 months. 8 months! That's not healthy, and you know it. Chloe was right, of course. Maya's previous doctor, Dr. Peterson, had been like a grandmother to her. Warm, understanding, and most importantly, familiar. Maya had been seeing her since college, and the elderly woman had always made her feel comfortable despite Maya's naturally anxious personality. But Dr. Peterson had retired 6 months ago, leaving Maya in an awkward position of needing to find someone new. The very thought of explaining her medical history to a stranger made Maya's palms sweat. She wasn't good with new people under normal circumstances, let alone in such a personal, vulnerable setting. Growing up, she had always been the quiet one in her family, the one who preferred books to parties, the one who needed 3 attempts to order pizza over the phone because she got too nervous. Just think of it like ripping off a bandage, Chloe had said, munching on her sandwich during their lunch break at the small accounting firm where they both worked. Quick and then it's over. Besides, I looked up this new doctor online. The reviews are amazing. Everyone says he's really professional and gentle. Maya had nodded at the time, but now, sitting in her small apartment with an hour before the appointment, she felt anything but confident. She had tried researching Dr. Hayes herself the night before, but the medical practice's website only had basic information. Board certified, excellent credentials, accepting new patients, nothing that told her what to actually expect. She changed clothes twice, unsure what was appropriate to wear to such an appointment. Finally settling on simple jeans and a comfortable sweater, Maya grabbed her insurance card and headed out into the busy city streets. The medical building was nothing like Dr. Peterson's cozy, slightly outdated office. This place looked like something from a magazine. Glass and steel reached up toward the cloudy sky, and the lobby featured polished marble floors that clicked under Maya's sneakers. Everything looked expensive and intimidating. Her anxiety kicked up another notch as she approached the reception desk. The woman behind the counter was perfectly put together, with sleek hair and a warm smile that somehow made Maya feel even more out of place. "Good afternoon. You must be Maya. We've been expecting you," the receptionist said cheerfully. "This is your first visit with Dr. Hayes, correct?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to come out steady. She handed over her insurance information and filled out what felt like endless paperwork. Medical history, emergency contacts, insurance details, consent forms. Her hand cramped slightly from gripping the pen so tightly. The waiting area was unlike any medical office she'd ever seen. Instead of the usual uncomfortable plastic chairs and outdated magazines, there were plush armchairs arranged around low tables with current books and magazines. Soft classical music played in the background, and large windows offered views of the city below. Everything was designed to be calming, but Maya still felt her heart racing. She tried to distract herself by reading, but the words on the page might as well have been in another language. Her mind kept wandering to what the appointment would be like. Would this new doctor be understanding about her nervousness? Would he be patient with her questions? Dr. Peterson had always taken time to explain everything, never making Maya feel rushed or silly for being concerned about minor things. Other patients came and went, and Maya noticed they all seemed relaxed, even chatting casually with the staff. A middle-aged woman emerged from the back office area, thanking someone warmly before heading to the reception desk to schedule her next appointment. She looked completely at ease, which only made Maya feel more anxious about her own nervousness. "I'm being ridiculous," she told herself silently. "It's just a routine appointment. People do this every day." But knowing something logically and feeling it emotionally were two very different things. Maya had always struggled with anxiety, especially in new situations. Even simple things like going to a new restaurant or meeting a coworker's friends could leave her feeling drained and overwhelmed. Medical appointments were particularly challenging because they required a level of vulnerability that made her deeply uncomfortable. She glanced at her phone. Still 20 minutes until her appointment time. The waiting was somehow worse than the actual appointment would be. At least once things started, she'd be focused on answering questions and getting through the process. Right now, her imagination was running wild with all the ways things could go wrong. What if she forgot important medical information? What if she couldn't explain her symptoms clearly? What if the new doctor was impatient or dismissive? Maya had heard horror stories from friends about doctors who rushed through appointments or made patients feel uncomfortable. The thought made her stomach churn. She tried Chloe's relaxation technique, breathing slowly and counting to 10, but her mind kept racing. Around her, the office continued its quiet, efficient rhythm. Phones rang softly. Staff members moved purposefully through the space, and other patients read magazines or scrolled through their phones with enviable calm. Maya checked the time again. 15 minutes now. She considered texting Chloe for moral support, but didn't want to seem overly dramatic. This was supposed to be a routine appointment after all. Normal, healthy adults managed these things without having minor panic attacks in elegant waiting rooms. The soft music and comfortable surroundings were clearly designed to put patients at ease. And Maya had to admit the environment was much more pleasant than most medical offices. Still, no amount of nice decor could completely calm her nerves about meeting a new doctor and starting over with someone who didn't know her history or personality. She found herself wondering about Dr. Hayes' background. The little information available online suggested he was well regarded and experienced, but that was all she knew. Would he be young or older, talkative or reserved, patient with nervous patients or more businesslike in his approach? Maya, a voice called from the reception area. Her heart jumped even though she'd been expecting it. This was it. No more waiting, no more worrying. Time to find out what Dr. Hayes was really like and whether this new patient-doctor relationship would work out. Maya gathered her purse and followed the medical assistant toward the back of the office, trying to project more confidence than she actually felt. Maya followed the medical assistant down a hallway lined with what looked like original artwork. The paintings weren't the usual generic landscapes you'd find in most doctors' offices. These were sophisticated pieces that probably cost more than Maya's annual salary. Everything about this place screamed expensive, from the hardwood floors to the subtle lighting that made everything look warm and welcoming. "Dr. Hayes will be with you in just a moment," the assistant said, showing Maya into an examination room that was equally impressive. The equipment looked brand new, and there was even a small seating area with comfortable chairs near a window overlooking the city. Maya perched on the edge of the examination table, her hands fidgeting with the paper covering. She tried to calm her nerves by focusing on her breathing, but her heart was still racing. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of some sophisticated-looking machine in the corner. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts, and before she could respond, the door opened. "Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Hayes." Maya looked up and felt her breath catch in her throat. Standing in the doorway was definitely not what she had expected. Dr. Hayes looked to be in his early 30s with dark hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. He was tall and had the kind of confident presence that made the room seem smaller. This was not the middle-aged, fatherly figure she had been preparing herself to meet. Hi, Maya managed to stammer out, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Of all the scenarios she had imagined for this appointment, meeting a doctor who looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine wasn't one of them. Dr. Hayes seemed completely unaware of her sudden discomfort. He moved into the room with easy confidence, closing the door behind him and pulling up a chair near the examination table. Maya noticed he didn't sit behind the desk like Dr. Peterson used to do. Instead, he positioned himself where they could have a normal conversation. "Please call me Dr. Hayes, and you're Maya, correct?" His voice was warm and professional, with just a hint of what sounded like an expensive education. "I know switching doctors can be stressful, especially when you've been with someone for a long time. Dr. Peterson was wonderful, and I have big shoes to fill." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak just yet. She was still processing the fact that her new gynecologist looked like he could be modeling medical equipment rather than using it. This was going to make an already awkward situation about 10 times more complicated. "I've reviewed your medical history that Dr. Peterson's office transferred over," Dr. Hayes continued, glancing at a tablet in his hands. "Everything looks quite normal and healthy. Is there anything specific that's been concerning you? Or is this just your routine annual visit?" Just routine," Maya managed to say, her voice sounding smaller than she intended. She could feel herself blushing and hoped it wasn't as obvious as it felt. Dr. Hayes nodded and set the tablet aside. "Perfect. I know this transition can feel overwhelming, so please don't hesitate to ask questions about anything. I want you to feel comfortable here." Maya glanced around the room again, taking in details she had missed in her initial shock. The examination table was clearly top of the line, with features she'd never seen before. There was a large monitor mounted on the wall, and several pieces of equipment that looked like they belonged in a hospital rather than a private practice. This is a really nice office," she said, immediately feeling silly for the observation. Dr. Hayes smiled, and Maya noticed he had the kind of smile that made her feel like he was genuinely pleased by her comment. "Thank you. I believe the environment plays a big role in patient comfort. Medical appointments can be stressful enough without having to deal with outdated equipment or uncomfortable surroundings." There was something about the way he said it that made Maya curious. Most doctors talked about patient comfort, but there was something different in his tone. It was like he really understood what it felt like to be on the other side of the examination table. "Now I'm going to ask you some routine questions, and then we'll do your examination. Is that all right with you?" Maya nodded, grateful that he was asking for her consent every step of the way. Dr. Peterson had been kind, but she'd had a more old-school approach. Dr. Hayes seemed to understand that patients might need extra reassurance. As he went through the standard questions about her health, Maya found herself relaxing slightly despite her initial shock. His manner was completely professional, but there was a warmth to it that put her at ease. He made eye contact when she spoke, nodded thoughtfully at her answers, and never seemed rushed or impatient. "Any major stress in your life lately?" he asked, and Maya almost laughed. "Well, switching doctors was pretty stressful," she admitted, and was surprised when he chuckled. "I can imagine. Change is hard even when it's necessary. Are you someone who tends to worry about medical appointments?" Maya felt seen in a way that surprised her. "Yes, actually. I get pretty anxious about, well, most things really, but especially this kind of thing." "That's completely normal," Dr. Hayes said, making a note on his tablet. "I see a lot of patients with medical anxiety. There are some techniques that can help if you're interested. But for now, let's just focus on getting through today's appointment at whatever pace feels comfortable for you." Maya found herself studying his face as he spoke. There was something almost familiar about him, though she was sure they'd never met. Maybe it was just that he had one of those faces that seemed trustworthy, or maybe it was because he was taking the time to really listen to her concerns instead of rushing through a checklist. As the appointment progressed, Maya noticed more details about the office setup. The computers looked like the latest models, and there was some kind of advanced imaging equipment she'd never seen before. Even the basic supplies seemed premium quality. This level of technology and luxury was definitely not typical for a private practice. "Dr. Hayes," she said during a pause in their conversation, "can I ask how long you've been practicing?" "About 2 years in this practice," he replied, "though I completed my residency and training several years ago." 2 years. That would make him quite young to have such an elaborate setup. Maya's curiosity was definitely piqued, but she didn't want to seem nosy by asking more direct questions about his background. The examination itself was handled with such professionalism that Maya almost forgot about her initial shock at Dr. Hayes's appearance. He explained everything he was doing, asked for permission before each step, and maintained exactly the right balance of thorough medical care and patient comfort. When it was over and Maya was getting dressed, she could hear Dr. Hayes speaking quietly with someone in the hallway. She caught fragments of conversation about the new imaging equipment and something about the research fund. There was definitely more to this story than met the eye. As she finished getting ready, Maya found herself wondering about the man who had just completed her medical examination with such skill and consideration. Something about this whole situation felt like there was a bigger picture she wasn't seeing yet. As Maya finished getting dressed, she could hear voices in the hallway outside her examination room. The door was slightly ajar, and she wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the conversation was impossible to ignore. "Did you see the new equipment that arrived this morning?" one woman was saying. Maya recognized the voice as belonging to the nurse who had taken her vitals earlier. "The ultrasound machine? That thing must have cost more than my house," another voice replied with a laugh. "But then again, Dr. Hayes doesn't exactly worry about money, does he?" Maya found herself freezing in place, one arm halfway through her sweater sleeve. She felt guilty for listening, but curiosity was getting the better of her. "I still can't believe he donated an entire wing to the children's hospital," the first nurse continued. "My sister works there, and she said the donation was anonymous at first. They only found out it was him when he showed up for the ribbon-cutting ceremony." "An entire wing?" The second nurse sounded impressed. How much does something like that even cost? 7 figures easy. Maybe 8. And did you see what he was driving yesterday? That red Ferrari? I looked it up online. Those things start at $300,000. Maya's sweater suddenly felt too tight. A Ferrari? A hospital wing. Her mind was racing as she tried to process this information. Dr. Hayes wasn't just well off. He was seriously wealthy. But how did a doctor, even a successful one, have that kind of money? The voices moved down the hallway, leaving Maya alone with her spinning thoughts. She finished getting dressed slowly, trying to make sense of what she'd just heard. The luxury of the office, the cutting-edge equipment, the expensive artwork. It all made sense now. But it also raised a dozen new questions. When she finally emerged from the examination room, Dr. Hayes was waiting near the reception area, making notes on his tablet. He looked up when he saw her, and Maya felt that same flutter of nervousness mixed with something else. Curiosity, maybe even intrigue. "Everything went well today," he said with that same warm, professional smile. "I'd like to see you back in a year for your routine follow-up unless anything comes up before then." "Thank you," Maya managed, accepting the appointment card he handed her. Up close, she noticed his watch. Sleek, expensive-looking, definitely not something most doctors could afford on a typical salary. "Do you have any other questions before you go?" Dr. Hayes asked, and Maya realized she'd been staring. "No, thank you for being so patient with me. I know I was pretty nervous. Medical anxiety is completely normal," he said kindly. "You handled everything very well." As Maya walked back through the elegant lobby, her mind was buzzing with questions. The moment she got to her car, she pulled out her phone and did what any curious person in the digital age would do. She started Googling. Dr. Alex Hayes brought up the expected medical credentials and practice information. But when she tried Alexander Hayes plus tech on a whim, everything suddenly clicked into place. The search results made her jaw drop. Article after article about Alexander Hayes, tech entrepreneur and founder of Innovate Tech Solutions. The company had developed some kind of revolutionary software that every major corporation wanted. According to an article from 2 years ago, he'd sold the company for $450 million. $450 million. Maya stared at her phone screen, reading the same number over and over. The man who had just completed her routine medical examination was worth nearly $500 million. The articles described him as a young tech prodigy and one of Silicon Valley's most successful exits. But the most recent articles were even more interesting. About 3 years ago, the business news had been buzzing about Alexander Hayes' unexpected announcement that he was stepping away from the tech world to pursue medicine. The headlines had been skeptical. Tech mogul's midlife crisis, and, from Silicon Valley to medical school, a costly career change. Maya kept scrolling, finding an interview he'd given to a business magazine just before starting medical school. In it, he talked about feeling empty despite his financial success, about wanting to do something that directly helped people rather than just generating profit. The interviewer had clearly thought he was crazy. "I've proven I can build something valuable," he'd said in the interview. "Now I want to build something meaningful." Maya leaned back in her car seat, trying to process this information. The man was a literal millionaire. No, wait, closer to a billionaire, who had given up running a tech empire to become a gynecologist. It was like something out of a movie. She found herself thinking back over their interaction, looking for signs she might have missed. He had seemed genuinely interested in her comfort and well-being, taking time to explain things and check if she had questions. There had been no arrogance or condescension, nothing that suggested he thought himself above the work he was doing. The more she thought about it, the more intrigued she became. What kind of person walks away from that level of success and wealth to start over in a completely different field, especially one that required years of additional schooling and training? Maya started her car but found herself sitting in the parking lot, still scrolling through articles about Dr. Hayes, or rather, Alexander Hayes, the tech mogul turned doctor. There were photos of him at various tech conferences and award ceremonies, always looking confident and polished. But in the more recent photos from medical events, there was something different about his expression. He looked happier, maybe, more relaxed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "How did the appointment go?" Was the new doctor okay? Maya stared at the message, not sure how to respond. How do you explain that your new gynecologist is someone who could probably buy the entire medical building with pocket change? It was fine, she texted back. Very professional. That was true, at least. Dr. Hayes had been nothing but professional throughout the entire appointment. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to the story. Why gynecology specifically? Why give up a tech empire to spend his days doing routine medical exams? As she finally pulled out of the parking lot, Maya found herself looking forward to her next appointment in a way she never had before. Not just because Dr. Hayes had made her feel comfortable, though he certainly had, but because she was genuinely curious about the man behind the medical degree. She'd always been drawn to people with interesting stories, and Alexander Hayes clearly had one of the most interesting stories she'd ever encountered. The shy part of her was intimidated by his wealth and success, but another part of her, a part she rarely acknowledged, was fascinated. What did you talk about with someone who had achieved that level of success by 30? What drove someone to walk away from hundreds of millions of dollars to start over in medicine? And more immediately, what was it like for him to go from boardrooms and business deals to examination rooms and patient consultations? Maya realized she was looking forward to finding out, even if it meant enduring another round of medical appointment anxiety. Some stories, she thought, were worth getting to know. 3 weeks later, Maya found herself back in the familiar elegance of Dr. Hayes's office, but this time for a different reason. She'd been experiencing some minor concerns that Dr. Hayes had asked her to follow up on. Nothing serious, just something that needed monitoring. But if she was being completely honest with herself, part of her had been looking forward to this appointment ever since she'd discovered his remarkable background. The waiting room felt less intimidating this time. Maya had arrived a few minutes early and was actually enjoying the peaceful atmosphere rather than feeling anxious about it. She'd brought a book with her, a collection of poetry by Elena Vasquez that she'd picked up from the library where she worked. It was one of those rare finds that most people had never heard of, but Maya had fallen in love with the author's way of capturing quiet moments of human connection. Maya, the same friendly nurse called her name, and Maya followed her back to the now familiar examination room. Dr. Hayes knocked and entered a moment later, carrying his tablet and wearing that same professional smile that had put her at ease during her first visit. But this time, Maya noticed details she'd been too nervous to pick up on before. The way he moved with quiet confidence, the expensive but understated watch on his wrist, the fact that his white coat looked like it was tailored rather than standard issue. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, settling into the chair beside the examination table just like before. "Much better, actually," Maya said, and realized she meant it in more ways than one. "The symptoms you mentioned to watch for haven't gotten worse. In fact, they've improved." "That's excellent news," Dr. Hayes said, making notes on his tablet. "I'm glad we caught it early and that the simple treatment approach worked." As he conducted his examination, Maya found herself feeling much more relaxed than during her first visit. Knowing who Dr. Hayes really was had somehow made him seem more human, rather than more intimidating. Here was someone who had achieved incredible success but had chosen to spend his time helping people with their health concerns instead of making even more money. "Dr. Hayes," Maya said as he finished up and she was adjusting her clothes. "Can I ask you something personal?" He paused, looking slightly surprised. "Of course," Maya took a breath, gathering her courage. "I hope this doesn't sound strange, but after my last appointment I was curious about your background. I ended up looking you up online." Dr. Hayes's expression didn't change, but Maya thought she saw a flicker of something, maybe resignation, maybe amusement, cross his face. "Ah," he said simply. "You found the tech articles." "I did. And I guess I'm just curious. Why medicine?" "I mean, you were incredibly successful in business. What made you want to start over in a completely different field?" Dr. Hayes set down his tablet and leaned back in his chair, considering his answer. Maya was struck by how he didn't seem defensive or annoyed by her question. Instead, he looked thoughtful, like he was trying to find the right words. "That's a fair question," he said finally. "The honest answer is that despite all the success, despite the money and recognition, I felt empty. I was good at building companies and making profitable decisions, but at the end of each day, I couldn't point to anything meaningful I'd actually accomplished." Maya found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested in his answer. "I remember one day, I was in a board meeting discussing quarterly projections. and I suddenly realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a conversation that mattered. Everything was about numbers and strategy and market share. I wanted to do something where I could actually help people, where the success wasn't measured in dollars but in, I don't know, in making someone's day a little better. And you chose gynecology specifically? Dr. Hayes smiled, and this time it wasn't his professional smile but something more genuine. Women's health is incredibly important, but it's also an area where many patients feel vulnerable or anxious. I thought maybe my business background, all that experience in making people feel comfortable in high-stakes situations, might actually be useful in helping patients feel more at ease. Maya felt a warm flutter in her chest. That was exactly what he'd done for her. Made an uncomfortable situation feel manageable and safe. Plus, he continued, medical school was the hardest thing I'd ever done. After years of success coming relatively easily, I wanted to challenge myself in a completely different way. I wanted to prove to myself that I could build a meaningful career, not just a profitable one. That's incredible, Maya said, and meant it. I work at the city library downtown and I see a lot of people who seem stuck in jobs they don't love. It must have taken a lot of courage to walk away from everything you'd built. You work at the library? Dr. Hayes looked genuinely interested. Which branch? The main branch on 5th Street. I'm actually a librarian, not just someone who works there. I specialize in literary collections and rare books, and that sounds fascinating. I've always loved libraries. There's something about being surrounded by all those stories and ideas. He paused, looking almost embarrassed. I actually spend a lot of my free time reading. Old habits from medical school, I guess, but I've always found books more relaxing than most other activities. Maya felt a spark of connection. What do you like to read? Lately, a lot of poetry, actually. There's something about the precision of language in good poetry that appeals to me. It's like the opposite of business writing, where everything is about being as clear and direct as possible. I love poetry too, Maya said, surprised by how natural this conversation felt. Most people think it's boring or pretentious, but I think there's something beautiful about how poets can capture huge emotions in just a few perfect words. Dr. Hayes nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. I was just reading this collection by Elena Vasquez. Have you heard of her? She has this way of writing about everyday moments that makes them feel profound. Maya's eyes widened. Elena Vasquez? I literally have her latest collection with me right now. She reached for her purse, pulling out the slim volume she'd brought to read while waiting. No way, Dr. Hayes said, leaning forward to see the book. I was reading that same collection last week. There's this one poem about two strangers sharing a moment of understanding. Brief encounters, I think it's called. In the space between words unspoken, we find the language of connection. Maya quoted from memory, then blushed slightly. I memorized that line because it felt so true. Dr. Hayes looked impressed. That's the exact line I was thinking of. It's incredible how she captures those moments when you meet someone and feel an instant sense of recognition. Like you've been having the same conversation in your head. Maya felt exactly that sensation right now. Here was this successful, wealthy man who could probably spend his time doing anything he wanted, and he was genuinely excited about discussing poetry with a shy librarian. It felt surreal but also completely natural. As their appointment came to an end, Maya gathered her things, including the poetry book. But as she stood up to leave, the small volume slipped from her hands and fell to the floor, pages fluttering open. Dr. Hayes bent to pick it up at the same time Maya did, and for a moment they were both reaching for the same book, close enough that Maya could smell his subtle cologne and see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. We are all stories waiting to be told, he said softly, reading from the page that had fallen open. Some brief, some epic, all valuable in their own way. Maya straightened up slowly, taking the book from his hands. Their fingers brushed for just a moment, and she felt an electric spark of connection that had nothing to do with static electricity, and everything to do with the unexpected intimacy of sharing something beautiful with someone who truly understood it. That might be my favorite line in the whole collection, she said, quietly. Mine too, Dr. Hayes replied, and something in his voice suggested they weren't just talking about poetry anymore. 2 weeks after her follow-up appointment, Maya was having one of those perfect Saturday afternoons that made her grateful for her job at the library. She'd spent the morning organizing a new collection of contemporary poetry that had just been donated, and now she was treating herself to lunch at her favorite bookstore cafe downtown. The place was called Chapter and Verse, and it perfectly combined Maya's two favorite things, books and good coffee. She'd found a small table near the large windows that overlooked the busy street, and she was contentedly reading while enjoying a sandwich and her usual vanilla latte. Maya had always loved how anonymous she could feel in places like this. Surrounded by other book lovers, she could disappear into her reading without feeling like she needed to make conversation or be social. It was one of the few places where her natural introversion felt like a feature rather than something she needed to overcome. She was deep into a new novel when a familiar voice interrupted her peaceful afternoon. "Maya, what a nice surprise." She looked up to see Dr. Hayes standing beside her table, holding a coffee cup and wearing casual clothes that somehow made him look even more approachable than he did in his professional setting. Instead of his usual dress shirt and slacks, he was wearing dark jeans and a simple sweater that brought out the color of his eyes. "Dr. Hayes," Maya said, feeling that familiar flutter of nervousness mixed with something warmer. "What are you doing here?" "Just Alex is fine when we're not in the office," he said with a smile. "I come here most Saturday afternoons. It's one of the few places in the city where I can just be another person reading a book instead of who I am in most other places." Maya understood exactly what he meant. "Would you like to sit down? I mean, if you're not meeting someone else, I'd love to, if you don't mind the company." As Alex settled into the chair across from her, Maya realized how different this felt from their interactions in his medical office. There, despite their growing connection, there had always been the underlying awareness of their professional relationship. Here, surrounded by books and the comfortable buzz of cafe conversation, they were just two people who happened to enjoy reading. "What are you reading today?" Alex asked, gesturing toward the book in Maya's hands. "It's a new novel about a woman who inherits her grandmother's bookstore," Maya said, showing him the cover. "I know it sounds like typical feel-good fiction, but it's actually really well written. The author has this beautiful way of describing how books can connect people across generations." "That sounds perfect for a Saturday afternoon," Alex said. "I brought work with me, unfortunately." He gestured to a medical journal sitting beside his coffee cup. "I'm trying to stay current on some new research, but I have to admit, the cafe atmosphere is much more appealing than my home office." Maya found herself studying his face as he spoke. In the natural light from the cafe windows, she could see tiny lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, and there was something more relaxed about his whole demeanor. This was Alex the person, not Dr. Hayes the physician, and she liked what she was seeing. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Don't you ever miss it? The business world, I mean. All that success and excitement?" Alex considered the question while taking a sip of his coffee. "Honestly, sometimes I miss the intellectual challenge of building something from nothing. There was a rush that came with solving complex problems and seeing ideas become reality. But I don't miss the emptiness." "Emptiness?" "It's hard to explain, but despite all the success, I felt like I was living someone else's definition of achievement. Make more money, grow the company faster, beat the competition. But at the end of the day, I'd go home to my expensive apartment and feel completely disconnected from anything meaningful." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand. I've never had that level of success, obviously, but I've always felt like there are two ways to live: trying to impress other people, or trying to do something that actually matters to you." "Exactly," Alex said, leaning forward with genuine interest. "And what matters to you? Besides poetry and helping people find the right books?" The question caught Maya off guard, partly because it was thoughtful, and partly because not many people asked her about her dreams and aspirations. "I guess I want to feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. Even something as simple as helping someone discover a book that changes their perspective, or connecting them with information they need. It's not glamorous, but it feels real." "That's not simple at all," Alex said seriously. "That's exactly what I was looking for when I left the tech world. The feeling that what I do every day actually helps people, even in small ways." They fell into comfortable conversation, discussing books they'd both read, places they'd traveled, and dreams they'd had since childhood. Maya found herself sharing stories she rarely told anyone, like how she'd wanted to be a writer when she was younger, but had convinced herself she wasn't talented enough. Or how working in the library had taught her that everyone had fascinating stories if you just took time to listen. Alex told her about the loneliness of rapid success, how he'd found himself surrounded by people who were interested in his money or connections, but not in him as a person. "It's ironic," he said. "I had more resources than most people could ever imagine, but I felt completely isolated. And now?" Maya asked. "Now I spend my days helping people feel comfortable during vulnerable moments. I get to have real conversations about things that matter. Yesterday, I helped a young woman work through her anxiety about starting a family. Last week, I was able to catch a health issue early, for someone who might not have had insurance to see a doctor otherwise. It's not going to change the world, but it changes individual lives." Maya felt something shift inside her as she listened to him talk. This wasn't the successful businessman she'd read about online, and it wasn't even really the professional doctor from her appointments. This was someone who had given up everything most people thought they wanted in order to find something more valuable: purpose and connection. "Maya," Alex said, and something in his tone made her look up from her coffee cup. "I hope this doesn't cross any boundaries, but would you be interested in having dinner sometime? Somewhere that's not my medical office, obviously." Maya felt her heart skip, but not from anxiety this time, from possibility. "I'd have to ask," she said slowly. "Would this be dinner with Dr. Hayes or with Alex?" "Definitely Alex," he said with a smile that made her stomach flutter in the best possible way. "Dr. Hayes is professional and appropriate. Alex is the one who spends Saturday afternoons reading in bookstore cafes and thinks poetry might be the closest thing we have to magic." Maya looked around the cafe, taking in the scene that had brought them together outside the constraints of their original relationship. Here, surrounded by books and the gentle murmur of other conversations, she could see a future she'd never imagined. Not because Alex was wealthy or successful, but because he was someone who understood the value of quiet moments and meaningful connections. "I'd like that very much," she said, surprised by the confidence in her own voice. As they exchanged phone numbers and made plans for the following weekend, Maya realized that her shyness hadn't disappeared, but it no longer felt like a limitation. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters really could lead to the most meaningful connections, and sometimes the best stories began in the most unlikely places. Walking home later that afternoon, Maya thought about how much had changed since that nervous day in Dr. Hayes' waiting room. She'd found not just a compassionate doctor, but someone who saw the same beauty in small, quiet moments that she did. And for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see what the next chapter might bring.